Braxcast time yet again. This is the 72nd episode of the Braxcast, and while there isn't too much in the news cycle for the Rippaverse specifically, of course, we do have the launch of Fiend is Free by Rennie Strakowski, or Irene Strakowski, known by Rennie online. That's doing well, over $30,000. Fantastic campaign. You guys should definitely go back it on Indiegogo. And there's also Empyrean, that's Gabe El-Taib's sci-fi epic 100-page or over 100-page graphic novel, and that launched on the Big Man Comics website last week as well. Both of those are fantastic books. I back both of them, so I'll be reviewing them when I get them eventually. But I figured I'd mention those because this is, of course, the Rippaverse podcast, but I also like to talk about the indies as we did on Braxcast Live yesterday, the day that I'm filming this on Friday with NDA Andrew, or just Andrew, executive of the Rippaverse, talking about indie comics in general. But to steer it away, or steer it back to the topic of the show, we're going to be talking about Lilian Ronashi and Michael Copper. Of course, it was announced during the Rippaveal that the Saskas, Jen Saska, is going to be writing The Curse, which is the one-shot graphic novel covering Lilian Ronashi, and Sylvia Saska is writing The Black-Eyed Club, which is going to chronicle the adventures of the womanizer Michael Copper. And I think with the way the Saskas have been teasing it on Twitter, these most likely could be the next two books in the release schedule. Of course, I could be wrong with that. I don't think it's going to be Alpha Core that's currently being colored right now, so it hasn't even hit lettering yet, which is a bit unfortunate. But I do think these books have a decent chance of being the next ones that are up for pre-order. So I figured, why not talk about these two characters? Because they've made a good amount of appearances throughout the Rippaverse, and they, of course, were introduced in ISOM number 1. And since they were both introduced in ISOM number 1, they both have their own Dokuman cards. They were part of the first set of Dokuman cards, being number 5 and number 6, respectively. And this gives us just a little bit of insight. Of course, we get information that Lilian Ronashi is of Japanese ancestry, and she's got the purple magic. And of course, Michael Copper is the womanizer who was born in Tennessee, and he's got powers that relate to his eyes. And if you've read the Rippaverse concept art book, though, or the one that launched with the ISOM number 1 campaign, Eric mentions very explicitly that there aren't too many characters in comics that have powers with their eyes. Of course, there's Cyclops from the X-Men, very famous example, but not too many have powers that are focused around their eyes, and Michael Copper is that. He can see through walls and stuff like that, but we haven't really seen much of these two using their powers in action, since they like to work through other people. But these are their Dokuman cards to show them off. Definitely always like to show off the Dokuman cards, and I did read through these on I've covered every set of Dokuman cards, but it wasn't the first episode of the Braxcast. I can't remember exactly which one, but if you want the full-on text, then read out to you, then I could I did that on one episode of the Braxcast, but I don't think it's 100% relevant to do it there. Definitely wanted to show off these two Dokuman cards because they're absolutely beautiful, and we do get a little bit of insight with especially Lilian's card, saying that her lineage traces back to Japan. And of course, we've got the fact that she got the that he is an accept. The thing that sticks out the most would be his skills in hand-to-hand combat, and of course, he's got the powers with his eyes. So definitely a little bit of interesting insight with the Dokuman cards with these characters. But the Dokuman cards are one thing. We should also go over the appearances that they make in all the books that are relevant. So we've got Bloodroof and Horseman. They make appearances. And then, of course, Alpha Core and ISOM number 1. But we are going to go in order with their appearances, at least in terms of the release schedule. So their first appearance, of course, was ISOM number 1. A very short appearance. This is only 2 pages where they're in a nightclub. They're talking about wasting time. A bunch of rich bozos and bozos pretending to be rich bozos. They're trying to remain discreet and blend in with the city. And of course, this is going to go into spoilers for a lot of Rippaverse books. So if you don't want to be spoiled for Bloodroof, then click off now and for other spoilers. So they had gotten to Flores Park. They wanted Bloodroof's castle, but Bloodroof was able to clear out that castle and take it over. So this is also, as I imagine, is happening like basically just after that fallout, and then it just continues on. So they have a very short appearance in this book, just really introducing the readers to this character. So that way it's like when you have the Dokkan cards, oh, this is Lilian and this is Michael. So we don't really have that much there. It's just really laying a very small seed for what's going to happen later. Now, of course, their first prominent role in the Rippaverse happens in Alpha Core. This is cover A, the Joe Bennett cover. Absolutely beautiful. And of course, I'm going to flip through some of the art until I get to the most relevant, because Alpha Core is a superhero police procedural, as Chuck Dixon has described it. And the main masterminds, of course, you have this bank robbery, right? That starts off at Texas Trust. That was coordinated by Michael Copper and Lilian Ronashi. And of course, at the end of Alpha Core, you have the Eagle's Nest that's crashing into Flores Park, poised to destroy everything. And of course, you've got Michael and Lilian just taking wanton joy in the destruction. Of course, we have Wilkins that saves the day. But the most interesting thing, this really establishes, and put that over there, that you've got Ingrid, who is a master investigator, right? She's a detective, if you will. And she's saying, board members of Bravo United subsidiary of Mornack Limited, a wholly owned division of Delar Estates, which in turn is owned by Keystone Holdings, which belongs to Ron Kopp Incorporated, of which you two are the majority stockholders. So basically they have this very... they like to work through people. So when they're robbing the bank and they're doing these criminal things, they're using Galvin and Billy Bob Quinn, whose initials are BBQ, and he has fire powers, which I absolutely love. Hopefully he has more appearances, but anyway, they're working through people very consistently. And this entire story is basically them pulling the strings to make all these things happen that are the events in Alpha Core. Of course, Alpha Core has that extremely dramatic ending with Eagle's Nest, and that's something that they coordinated. Of course, you see Michael Copper getting mad. His eyes are glowing, but they didn't have any hard evidence to capture them, and they have to operate within the bounds of the law. So the only thing that ends up is that Ingrid just cuts off the engine to the jet, and then story of Alpha Core ends there. But that's really the first confrontation that Lilian and Michael have with any heroes of the Rippaverse, the Alpha Core, and it's one that was non-violent, or at least mostly non-violent. The only thing that was destroyed was the engine of their private jet, of course. But it wasn't an actual fight. Of course, you have cover B, and I don't have it on me, but cover B is done by Will Conrad, and that shows Ingrid and Lilian going at it, and that's not something that really happens in the book. Might flash a picture of the cover here to show you that, but that's something that I'm hoping is going to happen, but it's not. It has not happened yet. Now, we're going to go into the Horsemen. Welcome to Flores Park, and they have a really short appearance at the very, very end of Horsemen. Of course, this is another Joe Bennett book, so you could just look at the art all day. And we see that in this little scene, I'm hopefully getting it in here in frame, but basically Tuna failed at stopping the Horsemen. Horsemen really foiled a lot of his crime plots, and because of that, Tuna was put to sleep with the fishes by Lilian and Michael. And you see that happening right there. It says, this was dirty work, Lilian. Care for a pumpkin spice Russian. There's always a bigger fish, so they were the bigger fish in this story. So definitely Tuna is associated, or at least was subservient to Michael and Lilian. Either that, or Tuna was not useful to Michael and Lilian after he failed to stop the Horsemen, so they have him eliminated, which honestly makes him a bit of an underutilized character. He's going to appear in Saints and Sinners. There's going to be a short story about the SSWL, and that's going to chronicle Big Tunas, because Big Tuna used to be in the SSWL, so it'll be really interesting to see. But It's really basically their only appearance is in this panel in the Horsemen, but it does give us a little bit of a cue into exactly the type of characters that Lilian and Michael are. And that's the really interesting thing about that appearance in Horsemen, is that it's really the first time we see them actually getting their hands dirty. As Michael Copper said, so they like to work through people, but they're willing to get their hands dirty and involve themselves. Of course, I think part of that was to, cue the reader or have that connection in there. See it give us like, oh, Michael and Lilian show up in this book. But the last appearance is in Bloodroof, and I think this is really the interesting one. Like I was talking about in Isom #1, you have Bloodroof's story having taken place before the events of Isom #1, if I'm getting my timeline correctly, and I think I am, is that Bloodroof goes to Flores Park, basically being estranged from her father. This goes to Flores Park, has an encounter with Gooding, and then Gooding is like, hey, I have this castle, my tech doesn't work, can you clear out the demons that live there? Bloodroof is like, okay, I'll do it. She does it. It takes a little bit of time. You got Choke, Morningstar, and Faye, I believe. I'm not sure if I got one of them, but I know Morningstar and Choke. Choke being the big obese baddie, and then of course Morningstar being the one who's the final boss. I forget exactly the terminology that they use specifically. I think devil, higher demon, if I'm even getting that correctly. But anyway, all of that is that they wanted that castle, Michael and Lilian. Gooding was hired by them to do that. Bloodroof clears it, and she gets anything as payment, and she decides to take the castle, which is what Gooding is saying in the scene, saying, what's the good news? She's not lying. She cleared out the castle. Not one, but 4 undesirables for you with minimal damages. The bad news is that Sydney's decided to keep the castle and all of its contents as payment. She wished me to remind you that you did say anything you own. And then what could the worst news be? I haven't given you my bill yet, which I think is the best thing that Gooding has ever said. And it's probably my favorite line. This book's my favorite page in this book. And it's such a good conclusion, and it really foils Michael and Lilian, but they all feel foiled for too long because Aztec declares bankruptcy amidst scandal, and then they decide to hide in plain sight through philanthropy and imagining that Isom #1 is the beginning of them breaking out and making that happen. So this is a really interesting thing, is that it does show that Michael Copper and Lilian Ronashi are really involved in a lot of the Rippaverse'S stories surrounding Flores Park, and they seem to be very essential to the underworld of the Rippaverse. The seedy characters are the ones who get linked by Michael and Lilian. Of course, we see that with Tuna, we see that with Billy Bob Quinn, and Galvin being basically mercenaries for Lilian and Michael. So it's going to really make it interesting when we get to see these books, is that how did these characters come to be? How did they get to the point where they're being able to work through all these people? Are they demon possessed? That is a theory that fans have had. I think it's one that's not entirely illegitimate, especially considering that there is explicit Christian themes, that the Old Testament and the New Testament are historical events in the Rippaverse. So of course that means demons would exist. Of course, Bloodroof's book is a testament to that, I should say. So the fact that they could be demon possessed is something that's definitely possible. And I think, as I said before, when that theory was flown by me, I said that is possible because demons love to work through other people. And that's what Michael and Lilian have basically done in all of their appearances and all the stories that they've been involved in. So it's going to be really interesting to get both of these books and see more about these two characters. Because like I've said, I went through every single appearance of theirs, and it's only been very short. Of course, there was some more scenes in Bloodroof. That probably was their most amount of page time that they had, but it's really just them saying, we want this castle. And then, of course, they didn't get the castle. So it wasn't them, having these epic fights or getting a ton of exposition about their characters. It's really just hey, we want to do this, we want to do that. And then it either working or not working out. Of course, Horseman's appearance is very short. And Isom's #1 was just a little bit longer. And then, of course, Alvcore #1 had that pretty nice conclusion, and they were there throughout the book. But it was really them working through people, and they were the ones who were ushering in the conflict that the Alpha Core had to deal with in Alpha Core #1, which of course is a fantastic book. Hopefully #2 comes soon, but I think these books are going to come out first. I'm going to be really excited to get my hands on them because, like I said, these characters are going to be really important in the Rippaverse going forward. So for us to have a good knowledge of these characters, I think, is absolutely essential. Of course, Shen and Sylvia are fantastic writers on Yaira and Bloodroof, so I've got no doubt that they're going to maintain that quality of writing with these two books. But that's all I have for you guys for this episode of the Braxcast. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff to follow up with what I'm doing at Velvet Room Publishing, what the Rippaverse is doing with all of their content. I love to cover it, and of course you guys love the coverage. Very thankful for that. But nothing else for you guys now. Joker is out.
Thank you for tuning in to the Braxcast. Be sure to like, comment, follow, and subscribe to keep up with the Rippaverse.